Right, so it's 1 minute past 6. Welcome all to the scrutiny meeting of the Place and Resources Overview and Scrutiny for Wednesday the 15th of October. Apologies for absence.
Through you, Chair, we have apologies for absence from Councillor Gulieva, from Councillor David Gaskell, with Councillor Hayes substituting for him, from Councillor Jeffrey Johnson of the committee members. Also have apologies for non-attendance from the Leader of the Council, but Councillor Slope is here in his place.
Thank you. Any others? Okay. All right. He's probably changing nappies.
Yes.
Yeah, so congratulations to Tom. I think his wife had another baby. So, yeah, he's probably got his hands full. Andy.
Yeah, I'm standing for Fiona. So I'm Councillor Kilbride, standing for Fiona.
Okay.
Not quite sure what's happened to Dan.
Okay, well...
Through you, Chair, just to be clear, on the last point, Councillor Cole has come off the committee and Councillor Kilbride has joined, so that's a change in membership rather than a substitution, I believe.
So welcome, Andy.
Thank you.
And can we also just, in the minutes, append our thanks then to Fiona for all her contribution, because she was really good and active, and when she spoke, she always had something worth listening to. So thanks, Fiona.
No challenge.
Huh?
No challenge to Andy.
Well, sorry, that's not what I meant, Andy. But but nonetheless, if you're as good as Fiona was, we won't have any complaints. You're trying to get me into trouble, Jonathan. I don't need your help. Any declarations of interest from members or officers? And the Chair's announcements, I was going to say welcome Andy, but I've done that. Minutes of this last two meetings. So we also have the minutes of the call-in. So I'll start with the minutes of the call-in, because that was the earlier one, on the 19th of August. So is there anything from an accuracy point of view that anybody wishes to bring up? Page 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 and 16. Are we happy they're a true and accurate record that I can sign? Agreed? Yeah? What's that one? And then the second set of minutes was our regular meeting on the 3rd of September. So again, anything that was page number 5, which ended with resolved. Page 6, which started Chairman's announcements and ended with quarterly budget reports. Page 7, which started latest financial figures and ended with the quarterly reports from the MTFP. Page 8, which started the committee noted that and finished on feedback and consultation for the local plan. And page 9, which started the head of planning policy and finished with a review of the committee work programme. Are we happy that they're true and accurate and I can sign them? Agreed? Sorry, Jonathan?
Yeah, just can I make a general comment on
yeah.
minutes? Yeah, it's just a general observation on minutes. And I have had a conversation with our lovely colleagues from Democratic Services, so it's not directed at anyone or collective, really. There are several areas within the call-in. I didn't point them out at the time because I don't think it's worthy of amending it. But there's quite a lot of that meeting that is covered by a general statement, which was there was a debate that ensued, which there was, and it was a fairly lengthy meeting of 3 hours long. So I appreciate that to cover absolutely everything in minutes, it would be a brick on each occasion. But I think I would want to make a recommendation, which is that that meeting in particular, I think most of our committees now are recorded. They're kept on YouTube, and I think they stay on YouTube ad infinitum. And I do think we should be including references and links to those meetings within the minutes, because there isn't any way that we can get absolutely every bit of dialogue and point made. But there were some significant points made and answers given that aren't captured in those minutes, and I think it's the most pragmatic way of making sure that they're captured.
Well, I think we're on the same page on that. I asked Paul about putting a link on all of those, you know, same with full council. And the last link I saw just took you to the West Northants YouTube page and not the specific meeting. So I think it would be useful that they get to them. I'd also like to see all of those properly curated, because I struggle even at times to find them by date. You go on, you look for full council, and you'll get one in 2021, and the next one's 2024. I'm not quite sure what the search order is or whatever search term I'm using, but it would be nice to get them linked to the actual, on the, what do you call your system? YouGov? No, Gov.
Mod.gov.
Mod.gov, linked on there. It would be nice to get it if it's possible. But.
So you talking, Chair, about a clearer link between the page on the website that has the papers for a committee meeting and the YouTube broadcast of that meeting?
Yes.
Historically.
Yeah, so when we've adopted them, you'll no doubt go and then put the minutes of the meeting up on this meeting from the 3rd of September. But if we can get the link to the YouTube meeting, put the actual meeting, not just a link to the general,
sure.
Here's the channel on YouTube. Because I think the last one I saw was more to the YouTube channel again, rather than the actual specific meeting. Yeah. And then Jonathan wants a 2 hour 16 minutes. Please.
No, don't worry. I'm not going to answer that. No, I just, it is the fuller record. That's the point, yeah. Really. That, you know, and I'm not expecting absolutely every bit of the meeting to be captured in writing. That, you know, there's no point recording it if we're going to do that. But we should be using the recordings effectively.
Yeah. Well, the minutes should only really record what decisions were taken,
yes.
Rather than Councillor Harris said and
yes,
Councillor McCord disagreed and Councillor
Hayes
said something different and so on. So that'll just go on forever. We have all that on YouTube.
Yeah, and we have some of that in all of our minutes to some degree, but not everything. And then it's the point of what should be and what shouldn't be. But if the meeting link is there, then it's covered.
Indeed. Okay. So item 5 then, budget scrutiny, to agree to further, the committee to further agree the timetable for budget scrutiny. I'm not quite sure what more we have to agree on this. We went round it last time round, but is there anything quickly to add on that?
Through you, Chair. No, not from our side of things. I think it's on there as a standard agenda item, really, just to make sure if there is anything else that you want to pick up through budget scrutiny, we can cover it there. We've discussed budget scrutiny twice informally, I think, and once formally at the last meeting, so it feels like we've done it to death a little bit. So, but it's on there just in case there's any further comments or questions.
I appreciate that we're in open session and you might not want to be, but how are things going in terms of narrowing the gap to get to wellness?
So, Chair, I'll pick that up under the next agenda item, if that's okay, when I talk about monitoring and next year's budget. Okay.
So Jonathan?
Yeah, just given up. It's not, it's working. Just one thing on that particular issue. Obviously, we normally have the working groups, and we've yet to fully decide exactly what those areas will be. Yeah. I don't think we've put a call out yet for volunteers. I don't know whether that might be a bit premature or not, but I wonder whether we could sow some seeds about what we normally do, and because I think we agreed we will follow the same process. But it might not be a bad idea, and Keith being here has reminded me of that. It might
I've just volunteered Keith earlier before the meeting started.
But it might not be a bad idea actually starting that process, sowing some seeds, and see if we can start getting some names.
Right, I'll send can you draft an email to all members from me, please, at some point, and we'll I'll send that round to, and we agreed the dates, so we got the dates as well. It'll be quite useful.
We have, Chair. We've got remote meeting dates already booked.
Yes, I know.
7th and 14th of January.
Oh, we did learn the lessons before where we left it too late and struggled. So, right. So I'll move on then to budget monitoring. Verbal update on where we are, and also then, you mentioned budget setting.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So through you, the last public position reported was P4, which went into Cabinet. and that showed an overall overspend anticipated of about 9.6 million. We're through P5 now, so we know the position for P5, so I'll quote those figures just so you're aware of that, so you get the bang up-to-date information, which is what we always do in this committee. We refer back to the last public information, and then we verbally update where we can. So P5 showed a deterioration in the position, moving us up to £11.8 million overspent, anticipated at the end of P5 but forecasted for the rest of the year. So that's the forecast outturn position at P5. The biggest movement there was in the Children's Trust, so there was a deterioration or an increase in their forecast overspend, our share of it of about £1.8 million. So we're now showing a pressure in that area of about £9.1 million compared to the 7.3 that we showed in the period 4 position which went into Cabinet. There were some other minor movements, but they were minor really. There was a bit of a upward tick on temporary accommodation. That forecast overspend increased by about 350,000, and some very other small movements across the rest of the services. So no other significant movements apart from those two that I've mentioned. P6 is the position at the end of September. We're heading towards the middle of October, obviously, so that information is being pulled together. I've got a briefing tomorrow on that in terms of where we are. Sorry, on Friday, just in terms of where we are, just pulling that information together. It probably is worth flagging at this stage. We will see more pressure on the Children's Trust coming forward as part of P6. I've seen that figure already. We will see some improvement in place in Stuart Timmis's area. So we're seeing some improvement there and some underspends coming through and being declared at that point. One thing that's worth highlighting is, because we've talked about the DSG deficit previously, so the DSG deficit, the forecast deficit for this year is about £32 million. Now, DSG, the high needs block within
Dedicated schools grant.
So that's the high needs block of the dedicated schools grant. Apologies. So we think the forecast for that is about a £32 million overspend this year. Now, the government has declared that deficit can be put on the balance sheet. So that sorts that out in terms of funding that temporarily, but it is just a temporary fix. But of course, the cash is going out of the organisation. And if the cash is going out of the organisation, we're not able to invest that cash, and therefore it has an impact on our treasury management returns. So we are seeing significant pressure beginning to come forward on treasury management, not just as a result of DSG, but that's one of the primary factors feeding into that. So I don't know the overall position for P6 is what I'm saying. We are seeing some big pressures coming forward. We're seeing some improvements in some areas. We'll pull that together and update when we can. And whether that will be up or down compared to P5, I'm not able to say at this point in time. What we have said we'll do is, once we get the P6 position collated, we'll then determine next steps in terms of what we do to seek as much as possible to bring that back into balance by year end. So that's the in-year position, Chair, and I'll just pause there to see if there's any questions.
I mean, the 32 million is obviously, as you said, it's a problem for the management of the finances. The real problem comes when all the local authorities have to pay back and how the government squares a circle, but it's such a big problem that the government will have to find a solution. So in a sense, we can hopefully sort of park that a bit.
We're all in trouble, it's just the depth that varies.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. But I mean,
I don't think we're in as deep as many.
But there's also going to have to be a national bailing out of that,
yes,
because everyone's going to.
I think it's about 2 billion nationally at the moment.
It's huge, yeah. It's going to be a major issue. The one that is more specific to us perhaps is around the Children's Trust, and that has been a problem for a long time. And I know that everybody's very concerned about the cost factors there and the purchasing that's being done by the Children's Trust and the decisions about care. There are a couple of things which I wonder how they're being looked at. One is that, as I understand it, North Hants is taking significantly more children into care than we are, but the breakdown of the split between us and North Hants remains as it used to be, and there has been some concern about a possible need to re-look at that. The other thing is about the difference in the age of the young people being brought into care. and also about the fact that, as I understand it, North Northants is likely to get an uplift in funding greater than we are because of the age profile of the children, and it might be therefore that we could go back and negotiate more with North Northants to reduce our share of that burden. It's obviously not going to make the problem of the Children's Trust go away, but it might help to produce some improvements, and it might then also help to change the spend profile for the Children's Trust going forward. And I wonder perhaps if Martin could say a bit about what's happening there.
I think those comments are all valid. I think we're very aware that so far there is a split of the contract sum of 56-44. We pick up 56% of the cost and broadly 56% of the cost, and the North pick up 44% of the cost. And the split of children has been broadly in line with that split in previous years and up until this point. I think it is something worth looking at, but it's something that we absolutely would have to discuss and negotiate with North Northants as part of that. And you know, we're happy to do that. We have regular discussions with the North on a whole range of issues, particularly the Children's Trust and some of these cost pressures that we've got, and we'll continue to do that going forward.
And if I can just ask, will that also take in the changes to the fair funding formula so that we can see whether we can get any improvements through that?
And that's a big unknown at the moment. So when I come on to the budget, I'll talk about the fair funding consultation and what we think we might get out of it. None of that's been confirmed at this point in time. There is expected to be an increase in funding because there's been significant population growth. There is expected to be an increase in funding as part of the consultation that we saw on things like social care within adults and children's. But in terms of what that means additionally for us, and what that means additionally for the North, we don't have those figures. There are estimates that went into the consultation process, which both authorities have seen. But in terms of what the consultation is now closed, there'll be lots of lobbying as part of that. There'll be some concessions given to some authorities, I would have thought, not until we see that final information, which is likely to be, we'll get an indication end of November. We'll get a better idea when the provisional settlement comes out, and until we get that information, we won't actually know what we've received additionally in the North or the West. It's a difficult discussion to have at this point.
But our issue is then going to be that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we have to agree the figure with Children's Trust by the end of this month normally, and then we will get the provisional figure until Christmas, but we've already fixed it. And if there's any, well, you fix it almost at the 6 months part of the year for starting in March, which is also, I think, something that we should look at to see can that date be moved forward. Because I think there's been a couple of times where we fixed it and then by February they're saying, well, but we might have a problem.
And Chair, that's right. We're right in the middle of that negotiation at the moment. In fact, we had a meeting first thing this morning with all three parties as the Trust and North Northants to work through the latest version of the contract and to continue with those negotiations and discussions. So we're in the thick of that at the moment.
Okay.
I mean, there's been a lot of concern expressed about the Children's Trust and about the spend there. And that deterioration in the position is actually pretty substantial, isn't it? And I wonder if you've got any more details as to where the pressure point is in the Children's Trust, and also what's happening with the discussions around the Children's Trust about actually managing the spend. Because obviously, if children need support, they need support. But there's also issues about how it's delivered and the impact on the rest of the council services as a result of a very sharp deterioration, actually, just at the point when, if anything, they should be looking to try to improve the position a bit as we head towards a year end.
It's par for the course for them, though.
Hey?
It's par for the course for them. Like they just, it's almost a perennial thing. They're going to be 10 to 12 million overspent. They have been every single year since their creation, and we fundamentally need to fix the model, which is financial control sits over there and responsibility sits here. And it's you can't say to them, we're not paying this extra, because remember that figure of 9 million or where you're heading to, you can practically double it for the actual figure that they're overspent.
Yeah.
So
I understand that, but there still has to be, there still have to be discussions, and there still has to be some looking at the type of care. I mean, they have obviously made change. They have already been looking at making changes to bring more services in-house, or to provide more direct accommodation, which obviously makes a change. The profile of the children, as I understand it, is changed, and at some point, given the increasing pressure on local government budgets, there has to be some sort of resolution to it.
Sorry, we should have taken Richard's item first. I agree, and one of the things when we come on to the next item, which apologies, Richard, we should have taken it first. The number of children in care, I think, is historically low, and I think that's because a lot of the issues that NCC had, just literally the bubble has moved along the pipe, and those children are now adults, and they're not children, and they've dropped out. But it is interesting we're still getting this, and I think there's a cultural issue too. But Martin,
yeah, thank you, Chair.
Want to say something?
So we have seen in the last few months some significant increase in the number of children in care. So it's moved above 1,200 for the first time in a long time. So we are seeing that level of demand increasing, and the level of demand is greater than that was built into the contracts done this time last year when we went through the processes. The cost of package varies from child to child, depending on obviously the complexity of those children that need that care, and we have a responsibility, not just statutory but moral responsibility, to make sure they are given the right level of care. In terms of what are the trusts doing about it, which I think is at the root of your question. We, as you know, they are autonomous, they are independent. We can have discussions with them, and we can try to or understand what things they're doing to reduce their costs. They have given us several assurances about what they're doing to reduce their costs wherever they possibly can, in all areas of spend. And the mechanisms they've got in place, the panels they've got in place to try and reduce some of their costs, and a whole range of things that currently take place. So at this point in time, because we don't run the service they do, we can ask those questions, we can seek assurances, they can set out what they're doing to try and manage that as best as possible, which is what they've done. We can't do much more than that at this point in time.
Jonathan?
Yeah, this relates to the next item, but when you look at the KPIs, it does suggest that the numbers are lower, actually.
Yeah,
because it
exactly.
cropped up, I think, at a cabinet meeting a month or two ago. The conversation was very much about the costs do seem to be escalating, but actually the numbers don't seem to be growing at the same rate.
Yeah.
So there clearly is a cost issue in terms of the purchasing of the services provided. But I think there's a wider issue, which is the long-term future of the trust, and that crosses over clearly not just this committee but other committees.
Yeah.
But and until we get to that point where we have had an Ofsted assessment and outcome, but I still think as a council we should be thinking about those options now, regardless of what that assessment might look like, because that won't fix the problem, because those costs I think are largely from outside sources. But it might suggest that perhaps the council should be investing harder in the capital side of things to provide more of those. You know, we talked about this, I think, over the last 4 years. We should have started it 4 years ago, but we didn't. It came late. But there is an argument that maybe we should be accelerating that process. And I think it's the scenario for looking at that, and I'm not sure whether that sits with us or the other committee. So. Yeah,
well, I certainly think I'll be very surprised if we don't come back to this for budget scrutiny, because we gave them a year off and nothing has changed really. Just anyway. Right, anything else on the in-year current position before we move on? Where are we with homelessness and temporary accommodation and the other things that tend to run around?
So period 5, there was a bit of an increase in temporary accommodation, 350,000 compared to the previous month. I've not heard there's going to be a significant increase this time, but I've yet to see those figures, and I'll pick those up on Friday. So we'll have a better idea on Friday.
All right. Okay. And then you parked, so moving on then to where we are with closing the gap and looking at the 26 budget.
Okay, so at the previous Cabinet meeting, Councillor Slope talked about the size of the challenge that we've got, and that was referenced in the press previously. So we started with when we did the budget refresh, of about a £50 million gap. That was prior to Star Chambers, which we've now been through that process. That has delivered a significant amount of efficiencies coming out of that process, but it doesn't close the gap entirely. Now, the big issue that we've got with budget setting for next year, and it's been touched on already so far this evening, is just the fair funding consultation that's come out from the government, and because of the scale of the differences in what the different scenarios show, it's very difficult to pin down what we think the grant will do for next year. So we've currently got 3 different scenarios running. The consultation is closed. As part of the consultation, we looked at the figures. It looked like we might do better, as I alluded to earlier on. There will be lots of lobbying taking place as part of that, and what we've yet to see is the final outcome from that consultation, and any hints from the government in terms of whether it's going to be very similar to the consultation process or whether it's going to change in any of the areas that didn't do so well as some of the other areas. So we still need to see that detail coming out. We thought we'd get some information in the policy statement that's going to be delivered by government, which we expected to be at the beginning of November. We did have a meeting with MHCLG last week, who indicated it's likely to be towards the end of November now. And that will not give us the final figures, but it might give us enough information to have more confidence in the grant figure we put into the draft budget, because that's what we're grappling with at the moment. What figure do we put in? Because the scale of what that grant could be is quite significant, and under the 3 different scenarios, we've got a scale of about 10 million difference between the better end and the worse end of what we think those figures could be. So quite a big difference there. Because the policy statement is likely to be put back now until the end of November, for us then to be able to turn around a draft budget report, which we can have a high degree of confidence in terms of what that grant could be within a week, and to get it into the Cabinet meeting on the 10th of December, it's almost an impossible task. So the view that we've formed is that we will look to push that Cabinet meeting back as far as possible in December. 22nd of December is
we're going to be meeting on Christmas Day at this rate.
is the date that's being mooted at the moment, with the view being that by the end of November we get an indication coming out of the policy statement, and then by the Cabinet meeting, so then we can draft the draft budget report, and then by the Cabinet meeting on the 22nd, we would hope that we've actually got the provisional settlement figures by then, and we can verbally report that at the meeting.
Well, I think we should go back to the suggestions that we had about having a January shorter consultation that's actually meaningful than a longer consultation based on nonsense.
And we did look at that, so that was one of the options. One of the options was keeping the Cabinet date as it is. That doesn't make sense because we won't have enough information to have a credible draft budget. The second one is to push it back by almost a couple of weeks to the 22nd of December, but we can do full consultations as part of that. And the third one is to delay it until the January meeting. But when we work those dates through...
That doesn't really buy you any extra days, given you've got Christmas.
But when you work those dates through, we would only be able to do a 2-week consultation process, which doesn't seem adequate. So the option that we're favouring at the moment is that we go for the 22nd of December. We hope and expect we get better information by the government by the end of November, and then we can draft the draft budget report as part of that. If that slips, there is always an option then. So if it doesn't come out by the end of November, if we don't get enough intelligence to draft that budget that we can have some confidence in, then there is the option to push it then back to January, but not at this stage.
Okay. And is there confidence that fair funding is actually going to happen, or are the government going to get cold feet, particularly when the losers start getting vocal?
I haven't picked up that they've got cold feet at this point.
We'll see. All right, so anything else on 26?
No, not from the chair,
Okay,
thanks.
fine. So we'll move on to item 7, the performance monitoring report. And firstly, Richard, apologies, because it did say on this chair's briefing, but I've been following it on my iPad instead, that you wanted to go get this one on first and get away early. So apologies that we haven't done that, but what is your drop dead time? No, was it? No, but... Well then, do as much as you can. I appreciate it. If you have to go, you have to go. So don't worry about being late for wherever it was. That's entirely my fault, so apologies.
Okay, Chair, if it's okay, I'll introduce that part of the report and then hand it over. So this West Northamptonshire performance report covers the period of 1st of April to the 30th of June. I've got the details and the breakdowns and everything else, but as that's in the report, I won't repeat what's in there, but it's I've got it well summarised. So the report aligns our performance framework to our new clear outcomes and our 7 new priorities in the One West Northamptonshire plan. It brings together over 70 performance metrics, including demand-led trend indicators, with concise service commentary to explain what is driving results, what is working well, and where corrective action is required. You will see status and direction of travel indicators, risks and actions and timescales proposed by services to keep delivery on track. Quarter 1 sets out the trajectory for the year, where performance requires improvement. The report flags issues and the direction of travel, with progress to be reflected in subsequent updates. We will continue to strengthen this framework, refining measures, improving data quality and deepening the narrative insight so Cabinet and Scrutiny have assurance and foresight they need to make timely decisions. I want to thank officers and partners for their work behind the plan, and would like to introduce Richard Corliss to speak further on the report.
That's working. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I thought I might provide an update on the some of the changes to the metrics that we discussed with this committee back in February. Those recommendations were taken through to Cabinet in June. Around that time, new leadership in place, and the Chief Exec was having conversations with a leader around what that might mean for this report. So as part of that, I pulled together a paper that included existing measures as well as the recommendations made by this committee, and then also pulled in the additional measures which were in the new One West Northamptonshire plan. So we had that rounded conversation. So at that point then there was a conversation around that, and it was agreed that at that point in time we'd keep the measures as they were, and then later in the year that then some of the changes would be considered and move forwards in the report in that sense. There were a few things that have been changed in the report that weren't necessarily measure changes that came from this committee, so a couple of bits just to run through. On the EV charging points, there wanted to be some narrative around the numbers delivered on council land. That's included in the narrative. Similarly, around the exclusions measure, about a rate of pupils to give some of that comparison. That's also included in the narrative. And the Homes for Ukraine measure has been changed across. That was occurring in the service anyway. There's a suggestion here to remove the Ukraine specific and change the wider community measure. That has been changed. That was happening in the service anyway. So those have been reflected. But then those additional measures are now caught up in the conversation about how we change that moving forwards.
So when are you hoping to have them ready? Sorry, when are you hoping to have them ready?
I think I need to check in with the leader and the Chief Exec around what those conversations have been for the Q2 report, which we're now just starting to consider pulling together. So it's about some of that timing that we're considering Q1.
Well, yeah, the timing is... Yeah, you're going to get me back on my hobby horse now. We're finished the 6 months and we're talking about the first quarter. It's almost pointless. So if we just move through the various coloured ones, because it sets its own briefing, is there anything then on the priority 2, the green boxes, potholes, electric cars you've mentioned?
I mean, it's just a small point. On the electric charging points, it would be really useful if there could be some indication as to the type of charging points, because I think that, I think there have been a lot of charging points added in Northampton, but I think they're all slow chargers. And I think it's an area which has some very large roads going through it, the M1 obviously, and the A14 as well, and then there's the A45 and so on, and A43. There's a real dearth of fast chargers, so people who are coming through will drive straight through and won't stop. And there's a real issue about that. So I just wonder if it's possible to have a bit more of a breakdown between people who want a charger in their road so they can charge up overnight because they can't connect up to their homes because they don't have the right kind of parking bay, and people who need chargers when they're driving through the area. I know from bitter experience that you can practically run your charge down driving through Northamptonshire because there just aren't the fast charging points. It's a real issue.
Yep, if I may, that was one of the questions that came up last year, and in the narrative itself it breaks down there. So of the 374, we've got 116 defined as rapid charging. So
and there's different types of chargers as well. Obviously, there's a CCS and the CHAdeMO and all of that, and it can be a real difficulty to get your charge. Speaking from experience, it can be a real problem trying to get your car charged coming through some of our roads.
Yeah, so the national data this pulls from doesn't have that style of breakdown. We just have rapid or not rapid.
Okay.
Councillor Harris.
Jonathan?
Yeah, just to add something on that point, I can't remember the exact figure. Martin might remember or might know, but I think we received some government funding for EV charge points. 2.7 million springs to mind. I don't know if that's the correct figure. But I'd personally also like to know how that's been allocated and how that's being utilised, which obviously this doesn't capture. It just captures numbers in regards to charge points. That might be an item or a separate issue. And if that can be dealt with, or I can get an answer to that in a separate way, then that would be fine. But that was quite a chunk of money that we managed to secure, and I think there was £400,000 before that to develop the strategy before we then got the additional money. I may be wrong, but it'd be useful just to know exactly where that is and where it's being utilised.
Happy to supply that information. I think it was the subject of a cabinet report a few months ago. But no, I'll happily circulate that amongst all members. But there is a report that clarifies and identifies how that was used and how that will be monitored, etc., going forward. So I can answer that very quickly.
So then moving on to waste fly tips. Doesn't appear to be anything there that's different that I can see. Jonathan?
This is a future-orientated one, and Stuart will probably know where I'm going with this. High interest in the change to the booking system, of course, for fly tips. So, and this may come back to this committee, perhaps. I don't know. It depends how it goes. But there is an awful lot of concern out there from residents. I think it's fair to say it's not councillors making it up or creating.
Well, that will probably show up more in the customer satisfaction, or at least it ought to.
It may do. But fly tips, I think we need to keep a really close eye.
It'll be interesting to see if there's a change, because it's always one of these things that when there's a change, members say, "Oh, that'll lead to fly tipping." Officers say it won't happen, and we can never really agree on it. I think it's a fair summary. Would you agree, Andy?
Totally agree with you, Chair. If you look at the Eastern District, where one of the refuse cycling centres is, it's full of quite a thing. It's a full-time job for these guys going out every day. No,
the fly tips are, but that figure of about 20,000 a year, 4,500 is probably on target for that. This is one that sticks in my mind. So it doesn't look to be getting any better or any worse, unfortunately, but it will be interesting to see if these changes to the household waste recycling centre make any difference. But it'll be January, February, March before we won't get to see that until later. And one of the problems you have is with this is finding trends. It's difficult to find them. Although if you look here, it says previous quarter was 6817, but that would have been summer, would it? that have been somewhere? This is January. This is April, May, June. So.
Please, I don't think it helps that the recycling will close at 4. Because a lot of people,
Yeah.
it's in the evenings. I think that's going to be a big problem.
Well, we'll just have to keep an eye on this one. But it might be something that's worthwhile coming to when that's in a year, that we have a 12-month report that says how did it go.
Yeah, so the report shows it, as you rightly say, it's down to 4,477 from 6,817, and enforcement is up from 400 up to 423 versus 260. So there's a glimmer of hope there. But as you say, time will tell to see to show whether the booking-in system and everything else is working.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if there's particular quarters are worse for... Do you want to speak, Peter? No? Okay. Right, so I'll move on to the next one then. If anybody wants to say anything, visitors to libraries. I noticed that was down, but how much of that was Toaster and how much of it had to do with the building work at Toaster, which I'm guessing might have put some people off, but I'm just guessing. I would have expected to have seen something like that in the narrative. Or did the building work start then? Because this is so old, we're talking about March, April. Yeah, it would have been right in the middle of it, March, April, May. Sorry, April, May, June.
Well, just on that, the figures show it's roughly 10-11% down. And I know Toaster is, it's only a small town really. But if this continues, what are we going to put in place to try and get the offering better from our libraries?
Yeah, fair challenge. But again, if you look at the historic little bar chart underneath it, it does tend to go up and down. So it looks to be up on the same period last year, albeit down overall. So, and some of those bars do tend to fly around a bit. But I know Toaster's a small one, but I think it does actually have, or did actually generate quite a lot of footfall. Anything else? And let's move on to council houses built. They are what they are. Applications. Well, that was the one I was wanting to see. What's the average time to determine it? Because I think the measures here are nonsense, and I don't put any store by them at all. Sally.
Thank you. There's two issues here. One's about obviously the number of new council homes completed and affordable homes is disappointingly low, and especially given the sort of figures that are set overall for new housing for the area. So it would be helpful to have a comment on that to see how we're going to improve that, bearing in mind that there have been those 3 housing developments that have failed. The second thing is that this is supposed to deal both with more and better quality homes. And I'm very conscious that the Northampton Partnership Homes has got that very big backlog of housing disrepair, which isn't included here.
No.
Now, presumably, that's partly because it's not actually come over to the council yet.
MPH have got their own. And I think there has been a separate MPH appendix going when this goes to cabinet.
But when assuming that the council takes over MPH and its responsibilities, if we're seriously going to monitor the better quality bit of the housing, then we should also be looking at the way in which that backlog is coming down, which I understand it is. I understand it's down from something like 22% to about 17 or 18%. But it would be really good to be able to have that monitor in so we can see it.
Those new homes, I'm looking at Keith here, are they the ones that were sitting locked and loaded that needed to be signed off and missed the last lot? There was 24 odd, if my memory's right. Yeah, so they've now been completed, which is probably this 28 that are showing up. Yeah, okay.
Those were 24.
There was around about 24-ish that had been. Right. They were complete and they were just waiting sign off at the last time we had a report, if my memory's right.
Yeah, that's right.
But they have now come. I thought they were in your ward, but yeah, they've been delivered.
It's castle.
Okay. But I don't think we all know the issues that we have with MPH. I don't think we're going to see substantial delivery on that new council houses
agree.
for a while. But
I agree, but it would be good to see, at least on the affordable homes, what the figures are. The council homes might be more difficult, but it would be really good also if we can keep a track on the tackling the backlog of disrepair. Because at some stage that will become the responsibility of the council, and it'd be better not to have a nasty surprise.
okay. But again, we see some issues where these things are outsourced. All right, Stuart, you were going to say?
Yeah. Sorry, am I on
There you are now.
I think when we were talking about the three difficult sites, challenging sites, there was a request to see the pipeline and the developing pipeline that was coming forward, and all of the different ways in which we were looking to increase council housing stock as we're going forward. So that's very much on our agenda. We're more than happy to bring that. I think we said in the next 3 months or something we would bring that back, should the committee want to see that. There is a cabinet report going, I think it's this month, looking to increase the stock through purchase, and we're working in partnership with developers to increase it by those means. So that is a rapid way of increasing council stock, is making, obviously there's a quality issue there, and we're making sure that they meet those quality assessments and requirements as well. So yeah, it's on our radar, Sally, and we're more than happy to bring that back so that you can scrutinise that.
Thank you. And the disrepair?
Sorry, I think that's something that I think the chair said that there is an appendices going as part of the MPH.
I'm right in that. I'm pretty sure there is an additional MPH appendice. Yeah.
That's this time.
So you'll have to pick it up there.
I have seen it. I have seen
maybe
it.
that goes
Just
to-
if this is going to want
Children education.
better homes as well as more homes. Thanks, Jonathan.
And does that go to
Then
Children
it'd be
Education
really
Housing
good
Committee
for
anyway?
that to be in.
It's probably going there and not here.
Yeah, it's just that you'd have thought if this is looking at more and better homes, that the better homes,
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Point taken.
it's just a figure.
Andy? Sorry.
Yeah, just a couple of points on that. It's encouraging to hear that we might be doing more acceleration of purchasing of homes, potentially for council use. That is an idea that we have put forward, I think, in budget amendments a couple of years ago, maybe. That there's quite a lot of capital assets that sit within the council. And my understanding is it's sort of around the £20,000 to £30,000 worth, not all property, but they're earmarked effectively for not for future use or for future redevelopment. So there is the potential to accelerate the refinancing of a different angle if we can move through getting rid of those existing assets. And it seems to me that acquisition is clearly going to be quicker than waiting for build, with all of the problems that we get around that. So that's good to hear. It'd be useful to know more about that if we can, in terms of detail of how much has been allocated from a capital point of view and so on and so forth. The other point I want to make is around the usual issue of planning applications. And I know this is the data that we report to government, but it does mask the other issues that sit behind it, which you know, Ian has raised many times, which is the renegotiated timeframes. And as a councillor on the ground, it's not lived experience. You know, we do get lots of queries from people who are developers or just individuals who are saying, why is it taking so long to get stuff through the system? So this looks great, but it's not reflective of reality. And I think we should have, whether we report it in here or whether we at least can see it in a different mechanism, it would be useful to know, because that's the reality that people experience when it comes to the planning process.
Yeah, these numbers are nonsense. I don't trust them at all. Because the moment planning say we need an extension, it falls into the or agreed timescales piece, and that can run for months and months and months. So we need the average time from the moment that you put your application in to the moment you got a decision. That would be a much better metric, because that's what people understand. Anyway.
It's a technicality, but
It was a big technicality. I know figures within my own ward. I've got things that are years old on the major side. But anyway, yeah.
We'll discuss that, no doubt, at many other opportunities.
Right, so moving through, sorry Andy, apologies, just jump in.
Don't want to be rude, Chair, don't want to be rude. Just on the prevention of homelessness, I'd just like to touch on. I see that the targets there have been missed quite a lot. And I know you've got a lot of work going on in the background here, but we've got the winter months coming along now. I mean, are we confident that we can get that figure higher to prevent what's going to happen? How do we feel?
I don't know. Do you want to take that one back and report through to Andy?
I think that needs a more detailed response than I could give tonight, Andy, if that's all right. So yeah, if that's all right, through the chair, I'll get some information to you.
But it's a good point. So moving on to the blue ones, best place to grow up. There's not an awful lot of these which are ones that we can directly do, certainly in the first one. Infants, mothers known to be smokers.
Chair, if I could say, I mean, some of these are really well known, they're well documented, and we don't see the improvements. I'm looking particularly at the EHCPs and the fact that the performance on those has worsened rather than improved. And I know that for parents of SEND children, that is one of the really big pinch points for them. It's the one that causes the greatest grief. The figures on the visits to newborn children are great. It's great to see that's happening. I'm just really concerned that although the figures of mothers known to be smoking at the time of deliveries come down, there's still a big issue there, and that is one which it doesn't just have an impact on the first child, it has an impact on the whole family, and it has an enduring impact on the health, and that should be one which, with careful targeting, it should be possible to get down further. Those were two of the main ones. And I just wonder, it's all very well to say, well, it's somebody else's responsibility to take care of this and to produce a turnaround in the figures. But I think it's right that this committee should say that we want to see those areas prioritised to make sure that there's some improvement, particularly on the SEND figures, which are very well known, and I know there's been work to try to turn those around. And it's really disappointing to see the figures in this case have still gone in the wrong direction.
Yeah, Andy?
Just following up on that, we know how dangerous smoking is for young mothers and that. But do you think we should be recording the vaping as well? Because that's going to be a big issue going forward.
Yeah, well, I don't know what do you know what, is it tobacco counts as smoking or vaping counts as smoking, or are they?
This will be cigarette smoking.
Cigarettes, so it's the 1 in 20 women are still smoking and having a baby, ish. Okay. Cyrus?
Just looking at the targets, we've got a target of 11%. Previous period 5.3%.
That looked high to me too.
We're coming down to 4.2%, but it looks like we're not meeting our target of 11%. I'm being facetious here. Obviously, we'd like it to be a lot less. If the previous period was 5.3 and the current is 4.2, can we drop our target to maybe 6? And can we also have a less than sign so that it looks like we're actually trying to get under that target rather than trying to achieve it? Yeah. Also, in the wording there's nothing there about initiatives and how successful they may be. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, on the EHCPs as well, I thought I noticed something that said we had a plan to get rid of the backlog. I can't find it now. But what is that plan? Farzana, did you want to mention anything on this area? If you might want to come up to that mic if you do.
Okay, thank you.
No, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, fine.
It'll come on in a minute.
Is this again something that one of the other children's ones?
Yes.
Yeah. So again, we just need to be careful that we're not doing the work of the Children's Scrutiny Committee here on these ones.
Just to say, in terms of the performance, in terms of EHCP, not only are the figures not improving, we've also got to look at benchmark comparisons where possible. And that's a general comment that I would have, Ian, for the whole of this document in terms of the performance document. We really need to be thinking about benchmark data where possible. Of course, it's not always possible, but simply having baseline and then looking at progress against baseline, to me, is not sufficient. We should be looking at similar authorities. We should be looking at national benchmarks to give us a really good picture as to whether we are performing well or not. It's very difficult to kind of get a sense of how well we're performing without some benchmark data. Just want to pick up the bit on, and Sally picked this up slightly, the parental concerns. I have had numerous occasions where parents' frustrations around EHCPs continue and appear to be actually slightly worse, because there are concerns about potential legislation having a greater negative impact. And we already know that, we've had industrial tribunals where we've not done very well. And a lot of that is to do with timeliness and parents not feeling engaged enough. So as well as the performance data not looking good, there are some issues around processes and how parents are feeling about this area.
Thanks. And James is just pointing out to me that the Children's Committee did look at this and they're saying they'll have the backlog cleared by January 26. I can't square these figures with that figure, but unless there's something really big going on right now. But because we've got such a time lag on that, we'll just have to wait and see until the next one. Richard, I'm just concerned that we, on this, is really for the other committee, so I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes. Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a general point around some of the comparative information. So you're right, quite a lot of the stuff isn't available nationally because you rely on national submissions. We've got the scorecards at the end of the report, which where there's nationally available, it is in there. And we try to weave that into the narrative. So just to pick up the EHC one there, we've got there that should be noticed that 50% of EHCs are issued in 20 nationally. So we are trying to weave that into the report where we can. But if you refer to the back, then there's some of that details in there as well.
Okay, thank you. Right, so anything else on the blue measures that anybody wishes to comment on?
Just a couple.
Yeah.
The one that we referred to earlier on, which is the children in care.
Yeah.
You know, this issue, the data here, and appreciate this is end of June, so if the numbers have dramatically changed since then, it'd be useful to know if that's the case, and presumably that is the case. And there is one other area, I think, where we've still got a big old chunk that just says query.
Yeah.
And I think when it went to Cabinet, the report said query as well around Care Act assessments completed.
It needs a number in.
Yeah, so I don't know whether that's just that we're not getting data from a particular source or what the issue is there.
Yeah. Oh, Martin, do you want to take it?
So I think it's just worth distinguishing the difference in the two reports. So the figure that I quoted earlier about 1,200 children was children in care, and this is children in need, which is a different definition.
I know, it does say children in care.
606 is what says is in care. This one.
And it talks about it's on a downward trend.
Okay, so going back to the 1,200, the 1,200 is the number of children across the whole of Northamptonshire, whereas this is just the West Northampton figure.
Yeah, understand. But point is that financially we are definitely in an upward trend, whereas this is talking or showing, suggesting a downward trend. So there is still quite a gap.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to the comment made by Councillor Keeble earlier about are we getting into discussions about how we split that contract sum going forward because of that difference between the West figures and the North figures.
Yeah, but forgetting even the split, the total spend is rising. Sorry, do you want to come in, Richard?
I was just going to respond to the query one.
Yeah, do that.
So the query one is around care assessment and social care. So implemented a new system that went live in February as we were putting together the data for Q1. The numbers appeared to be quite high. Reassessments were included in the system alongside care assessments. We didn't have an actual way to split them at that point. So we're still working through that moment. We should have in the Q2 report an accurate number, because if we put a number there, it would have looked massive because the reassessments, part reviews are included. So it's just a new system oddity and a change in process.
And I'm really sorry, I can't remember whether it's here in another one, but I think it's in this one, which is the point about the Disabled Facilities Grant, which there's still a reference to some of the underspend, to there being an underspend and it going back in-house, as it were. Now, 2 points about that. I mean, one is that I've certainly had known people who have applied for it and haven't been able to get it, which is odd if there's an underspend. But the second thing is that it's such an important and useful funding stream to be able to maintain people in their own homes. And I think it's funded by central government too, so it's almost like kind of free money, as it were, for the council. And it just seems an absolute crying shame for that budget not to be fully spent. And I thought it was normally massively oversubscribed in most councils rather than being underspent. So it would be just flagging that one up. It would be good to see that spent and even have a backlog of cases, applications, to make sure that there's always a good pipeline of projects to help keep people in their own homes.
Okay. Do you want to quickly come back on that?
Just very quickly, so I think it's on page 38, the reference to disabled facilities grants. And what it says is, we currently have an underspend from the COVID period, which is now being utilised. So it's from the COVID period from previous years, which are now utilising to make sure that it is spent going forward.
But it says there's still some going back in because of the underspend, which is presumably because of the pipeline.
Yeah.
But just be pleased to get that spin.
But absolutely, fundamentally agree. If we get into Disabled Facilities Grant, we should be making sure it's fully allocated and spent. And we'll do everything we can to make sure that happens.
And then the last one, priority 7, the Efficient Enabling Council. Has anybody got anything to say on that? Complaints, customer satisfaction, council tax. It's good to see that housing revs and bends are doing what they said they were going to do, which is to turn around those figures. They're all heading down as we were told they would. So I think we should also point out where they said they were going to. We knew they were going to go up and then they were going to come down, and Belinda certainly delivered on that. So if you can pass on our thanks to that's noted.
Yeah, just one point. There's another gap on page.
Yeah, there's
41.
an XX million.
Yeah.
Of the revenue budget and surplus.
Sorry, Richard.
No, that's right. I'm not quite sure what that did end up in the final version. So it's one of those things. It's very last minute, depending on when the revenue paper is ready for cabinet. I can't answer.
You wanted to fill something in there, Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to pick up on the latest benefits performance information, just building on the point that you've made, because we did give the undertaking that things would get better. So the current position on housing benefit new claims year to date is 18.4 days against the target of 20 days. So we've come below the target for the first time. So again, acknowledgement to Belinda Green for all the hard work and effort she's done to make sure that's happened. Housing benefit changes are currently 10.7 against a target of 8 days, so slightly above, but compared to the last quarter, still a significant improvement.
And new claims? The new claims for the 20 and the...
Yes.
Yeah, and the changes are 8. Okay. Well, that's useful. And council tax collection?
Current council tax collection is 56% against a target of 58%, so we're slightly down on council tax collection. worth highlighting, that's the in-year position. That's what we're reporting on here. When we get through the year, we still try to recover outstanding council tax from previous years. That's the in-year position, but it's 56 against 57.7, and NNDR collection is 54.3% against a target of 56%. So again, slightly down against the target, which we are keeping a very close eye on at the moment.
Okay. Right, anything else to say on that? Because I think we do need to move on to the next item. So thank you, Richard. So next item is Section 106 agreement, the terms of reference. So we've talked about doing some scrutiny or establishing a working group to look at things and what's members' view and what these terms of reference are.
Sorry, is it worth me just...
Yeah, crack on.
Quick intro. There we go. Right, as members know, we were asked to put a task and finish group together. I think we're committed to that. Again, the who, the how many times is exactly why we're here tonight. As members will know, Section 106 has got to be directly related to the development. It's got to be reasonable in scale. It's got to be necessary for making the scheme deliverable, and it's also got to be within the financial constraints of the. It's got to make sense from the development point of view. There's four key issues here. I think one is the what. What do we look at, and what do members want to see? There's the finance connected to that. Well, how much then are we able to collect? How do we then process the claims, and then the role of members. I think we've touched on some of those within here, but again, just as an introduction of Section 106, looking forward, what does that look like? I just thought I'd just give you that as a quick summary. So again, over to you, members, in terms of what do you want to see? How many times do you think you need to meet as a part of that? And again, who then do you want to invite as part of that is probably the discussion we need to have. Thanks, Chair.
Do you want to add anything, Richard?
Thank you, Chair. Just happy to listen to the members.
Members? Sally?
Thank you. This is perhaps a point which might just be worth considering, because in a previous existence I had quite a lot to do with Section 106, and in Southwark, you know the Thames Walk, you know, along the south bank of the Thames, it's a nice tourist walk. That was done under Section 106, and I had a big role in that because I was leader in Southwark. And we got that and were challenged in court and won out, and were able to get developers right from the river right down to the Elephant to have to pay their 106 into getting that. The argument being that the economic benefit that would come out of getting people to cross the river and to spend their money in Southwark would actually benefit people right the way down to the Elephant. And that's how that walk is absolutely, you know, every time I think I haven't done enough in politics, I go and walk up and down there and feel quite good. And it just seems to me that you know, you can use Section 106, and it's obviously important if people want a library for a village or they want a road done or something like that. But there's some really major strategic stuff that could be done in Northampton. For example, the whole of the River Nen, all of that river frontage could be turned into a real tourist trap that could bring money into Northampton and create value in the middle of the town, and the whole town would benefit from that. Now, you have to have real consensus to get people to buy into it and to get them to support it, because otherwise they just all moan and groan and the developers take you to court and what have you. But it could absolutely transform the economy here and transform the river and help drive the regeneration of the town. And there must be other projects like that, where instead of saying we're going to just do a road or we're just going to do a library, you can say we're going to take this bit, and all the development for a certain area is going to go into really adding value there. And I wonder if we could look at that as well as one of the options.
Sorry, do you want me to come back on that one? I think, first of all, I wish I had the values Suffolk had, and then absolutely would be behind you on that one. I think what you're saying there is to include SIL as part of that, because Section 106 is legally defined. It's got to be relevant to the area. You prove that, and you prove that because of values, etc. SIL, actually, you can do that without having to prove that as well. So it's still looking at what are the key opportunities members want to see investment in. How do you, so again, the what, the how do you get involved in that as we go forward, the processes for making sure that we get the right money and that money is then dished out. Sorry, that's exactly fits in with the scenario that I sort of mentioned. Again, I think Richard put in a terms of reference there. Again, we can pull that apart and put it back together to suit. So I think, yes, we can look at that. I think by including SIL and broadening out the terms of reference, we can pick up those sorts of objectives and opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so is there any comments on this as a proposed terms of reference? Jonathan, before I give my view.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of points I'd make. I think one is that it doesn't really specifically talk about historic scenario, and I think there is an issue about learning.
Deliberately tries to scope it out.
Well, I'll let you contribute at that point, because I'm sure that's probably the angle you'll go up. But I think there is learning from the past, and I think we should somehow find a way of incorporating the learning from the past, because it hasn't worked well. Let's be honest, we've had issues, serious issues, and so that's the first point really. Is how do we make sure that we take that into account? We learn from the past so we don't get the same failures. I think the other thing is, and this is a slightly broader context really with parishes. I don't think parishes necessarily know their situation, and therefore we do need to try and equip them better to understand it. We are in a situation of flux with planning, as we know. There could well be some fairly major changes come forward at budget time in terms of the whole planning system and the way the planning system works. And I think, given that it's about mitigation of development, one potential scenario is that we lose a lot of our localism contribution to planning, and we may end up with situations where we have less control over that. That's not what I certainly want, but it is a possibility. And I think, therefore, we need to be equipping parishes to understand how they get benefits out of it. You know, if stuff's going to happen, there needs to be payback, is the simple terms. And I don't think they really get or have the opportunity to understand that, probably because in many instances, if they've been involved in Section 106 work largely, it's always very specific. You know, we've had instances of sports provision where they don't even have any sports provision to add to or develop. You know, it seems a little bit like plug and play. And it sort of, I guess, builds on your point, really, that maybe it should be a little bit more strategic than just, you can have this. You know, here's your community centre, which might be right for some, but not for everybody.
I think both approaches have got their issues, though. Yeah. Anybody else wish to speak? Because for me, this doesn't do it at all. This is just typical member management from the planning department. You know, this is what we think you should do, which is not really what we need to look at. The issue I have is, where's the cash going? So when we collect money for libraries, does it go to the nearest library that development was at, or does it just go into a library pot and God knows where it comes out? We've got issues with health, that we know we have issues that we are collecting 106 monies for health, and the money from that is not flowing out to the relevant surgeries. We don't know where this is going. So things like, you know, mitigation considered necessary and things, there is no guidance for anybody on these sort of things. And we are probably straying into, in some of those, the areas of the planning department. We do need to look at what has gone right and what has gone wrong in the past, but that would involve becoming a learning organisation. You certainly won't find that in the planning department. To my mind, this just doesn't do it. We need to work out, you know, how much has been allowed for each parish, that they can know how much 106 and SIL monies they've got. How do they go about spending it? Why are we allowing people to make up rules that aren't in the 106 in order to basically justify their existence? Those are the sort of issues that I think we should be looking at, but I'm open to others to say if that's just me or my hobby horse.
Obviously, I don't share some of those comments in terms of a learning organisation, etc., etc. Obviously, as chair, you're welcome to those comments. However, everything you said there, in terms of what we should be looking at, I don't disagree with. I think it's important that we do look back in looking forward. That's how you get good results. So, whilst that was implicit in what we were talking, we'll make it explicit. I think the focus should be on those learning points rather than spending too much time on the past, if you like. I think it is important that its focus is looking forward. I think, if, as an example of that, if you look at some of how the Section 106s have been written, they've been so specific that if something changes, then you really are scuppered in terms of what you can then do. And I think health is a great example of that. If you say this money has to go into the development or extension of a health facility, and then the health guys go, well, we've got no doctors to put in there, so what's the point? Sorry. There's no flexibility. So I think the flexibility point and looking and working with our partners is absolutely key. I think where is the cash going? What again, that fits into what I was saying at the start, what is it that we need to mitigate? What's important to your communities? And getting a process as well, where an application comes forward, because a local plan lasts for 10 years, and therefore lots of things happen. Things that you think you need in year 1 might not be the things you need in year 5 or 8 or 10. And we've seen that with schools at the moment. The population decline means that lots of the policies were around getting new schools in. Actually, all new schools will do is close other schools in some areas, so we've got to be careful of that. So again, making sure we've got a process that looks at it at the start, but then brings members in when an application comes in. So as soon as somebody knocks on the door, how do we engage local members and towns and parishes? That doesn't happen at the moment, but let's look at how do we do that. So again, what I'm saying there is there's an open door on this. There's nothing that has been said tonight we don't want to discuss. That won't add value to what we can do. Obviously, there is legislation, and again, changing legislation, so we obviously have to reflect that. But what's the art of the possible? Sorry, that is very much a brief we would happily bring forward. And again,
there's no. I think what particularly parish councils that I go to, they want to see transparency on it. Where's the money going? You know, there was 100 houses built over there. There was Section 106 of 400-odd thousand amongst housing, education, health, blah, blah, blah. You can't point to it. You can't know. In fact, and on the health side, we know there are issues. We know that health, you know, the council will collect money and say we're going to send it to that surgery. And then the ICB, and I don't even know why they're getting involved because they were never party to the 106, then say, oh, well, we don't want to go there. Well, but then the money goes nowhere, and it's wrong. And you know, the NHS saying, no, we can't be bothered to spend it. Like, well, we all know they're dripping with cash. So it's, and none of that, those are the issues you want to get, but you don't get that in this, because of course these are all the things that I suspect the planning department don't want to discuss.
That was my point about the plug and play thing.
Yeah.
Historically, historically, I think that's been the problem. That we've had this situation where it doesn't feel like it's been that engaged with communities in honesty. It's just not really been there. And if we are entering into, you know, planning is a permissive system already, in theory. I suspect we're heading even further down that route. Yeah. I suspect. So therefore, that's where parishes really do need to understand. You know, they need to frame applications if they're fairly large applications. Yes, of course, if it's not in line with policy, then there's opportunity for objection to that, and there should be. But they need to also think about the what-if scenario. So if it happens to go ahead, and I think parishes don't like to have those conversations because they think that means that we're actually agreeing to it, really. But I don't think we should shy away from saying, if it is minded to be approved, then this should go with it. You know, so it's got both.
Can I come back? I mean, because I can understand from parishes that they see some improvements. And oh, sorry, were you wanting to come in?
Yeah, so I think the Chair
Go
was just
on.
trying to bring me in.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, if you look at the third point of identifying suitable... Sorry, that one was on. The third bullet point in the identifying suitable mitigation box addresses that very point. Because we know communities have difficulties, if you like, facing both ways. They feel if they oppose a development, it would weaken their case if they then identify the mitigation that would be required should that development go forward. So we understand that point, Councillor, but we've covered that in bullet point 3 within that box. And in terms of the looking back, I think, again, we'll be very clear. So in terms of what we said out of scope is that we feel the purpose of this review isn't to kind of unpick existing 106 agreements, but if we can learn from them, then that absolutely is that is what we're looking for, and that is covered in the first bullet point under out of scope. We can learn from what has happened in the past. And the introductory section to the whole terms of reference is talking about improving our systems. So we're here to learn as members and officers. That's very clear direction of these terms of reference. And I think everything that members have been talking about is covered by what we've drafted. We can look at different words, a different form of words, if that addresses members' concerns, but I've not heard anything so far that isn't covered by what we've said in the drafting so far. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Because I think there is a difference between some of the very detailed stuff that might be applicable for parish councils and the bigger strategic objectives that you might want for a much larger area. Where, and if you want to see some stuff which I find really depressing, is if you look at the proposals for the station for next week, where sort of each department says, I want so much for a library and I want so much. Oh, should I not speak about it?
Do not say.
Okay, sorry. Okay, I won't.
Sorry, we're not doing planning.
Okay, I'll say something slightly different.
But when you get these formulaic things, so much for house, so much for library, which are formulaic in general, a 3-bed equals 2,000 and a 4-bed equals 6.
It doesn't work very well.
Where does the money go? When it says going to a library, is it...
Let me just finish. Okay, it's where each department says it wants a bit, and actually it might be that the area would benefit from a much more strategic approach to how that money's being spent. And what can also happen is a development in one place might have an impact on a neighbouring place, a very profound one, which is not covered at all in Section 106. If I give an example that won't, I hope, make your hair stand on end, is for example at Moulton there was a development where the Section 106 went into a community centre and such like, whereas a lot of the impact was felt down in Keith area because the water overflow came down through Billing Brook, and that is just a complete mess, and there's been no improvement there at all. So, sometimes, in some areas it might be that the parish wants and is entitled to see the money spent within that little area, whereas in other places you'd have to take a much wider and more strategic look at what's happening. And the second thing is, can you just give an idea about because my understanding was that the SIL money was never quite as big as Section 106, partly because the developments tended to be smaller. So I think it's quite important perhaps to have some understanding about the perspective, about the different proportions of funding in those different streams.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah. I think two things there. One is I think what we can do is look at a series of meetings that reflect tonight's meeting, so we can have one on the what is it, what are the mitigations, what are the opportunities around SIL, what are the issues now. So at the moment, because of the way SIL works, it is a formula. The local government and legislation say it can only be X amount based on land value, based on profit. And again, I've said this so many times, house building and the way we have to look at it, the government already give them a 20% profit is what we've got to build into our... I mean, what other development company, industry can guarantee that sort of level? But that's the sort of levels that we have to work within our systems of finding out how much they should be paying, etc.
Okay.
So again, we'll give you all of the information as to how that is, and then we can start to look at how it then works and what are the mitigations and where is the principles behind that. At the moment, SIL is a big pot of what you've got to get all your schools out of, you've got to get roads out of, you've got to get etc. And there's not enough money in it to do that. So again, it's the Section 106 at least puts a list there that says it will be a school, it will be a road, it will be. And if you don't do that, you don't get your development. So there's a whole debate there. So that's one. One could be the finances, Ian says. How does he work out the finances? How does it then, the processes behind that? So I think, sorry, what I'm saying there is if we work on tonight's conversation, break it down into some key areas, and then we can come back and agree that with you, Chair.
Right, so are we saying that we should take these comments into effect and have a second go at these draft terms of reference?
So can we suggest that there's four meetings, task groups, and then we can break it down? How many do you think we'll need?
There's a meeting, we're meeting again next month, so why don't we just try to get these terms of reference right? But
okay.
Is that what we're saying?
We can do that. We can put more detail into what
feel
Richard said, building on that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Fine.
Sorry.
Yeah, Chair, just one thing. I would point out, quite rightly, Councillor Keeble brought up about people not knowing about the SIL, councillors and parish councillors. We've got an hour and a half of training tomorrow evening on 106 and SIL, and then perhaps look at how that training goes, and then open it up to parish councils.
Sorry, we've also got the annual parish conference on the 23rd, where again we're talking about Section 106 in a lot of detail there as well. So there's two opportunities. So as a planning service, we are trying to get out there and get the conversations going. Thank you.
Steve, Chair. Can I just make a comment on that? There's, and you're right, transparency is the key. And I take everything on board what you just said there, Stuart. But you're saying, oh, parish is this and parish is that. There are lots of areas around the town that haven't had a parish. And for me, this is where the problem kicks in. Because you can do a development, and because you're not liaising with a parish, they go, oh, what money is this? They don't know about the money. And I think the communication from the council is very poor on that part. Yes, if you've got some switched on councils, they can apply for it and whatnot. But if they don't apply for it, it just sits in this vast hole somewhere.
And that's what I'm trying to get. That's for me is what we should be trying to get to.
Right. So you never know. I think I'm right in thinking, on certain situations, if it's not spent within a certain time, the developers can have it back.
It depends on the terms of the 106, but yeah, most of them do have clawback clauses.
That comes back down to officers and whatnot saying, come on guys, spend your money.
Yeah, they don't.
Communication's the key.
And sorry,
oh yeah,
sorry. And that's one of the processes that we're looking to implement as we speak, so that there is a constant updated schedule of Section 106, that ward members and towns and parishes are on a constant basis reminded of the monies that are there. Again, in non-parished areas, you're right, we do rely on ward members as that conduit because it fills the gap.
Town council is effectively a large parish.
Sorry, no, town and parish, sorry, no. We're saying the same thing there, Jonathan, absolutely.
Before then, there was no communication.
But that's the point. It's learning the lessons from the past, and that exact point there, Andy, fits in with one of the working groups that how do we refine that? How do we get it right? How do we meet members' expectations? The only way we'll do that is by having these conversations, and it's a two-way communication, because, as I said, there is legislation behind this, there are rules behind this. It's not a wish list. And that's one thing we need to point out at the start of this. It isn't going to meet every one of your requirements, but nevertheless, it's important that we meet your priorities, if that makes sense.
So are we saying have a second go at this terms of reference and take it back next time? Yes. Yeah? Yeah, please. Right, so...
Just a quick comment on that. Parish Council held last night. It's a regular topic of conversation. It's great to see in here this awareness raising, and if it's discussed again at the annual conference for parish councils, that would be great. But it looks like it's going to be a dramatic increase in work. Parish councils sit quite often. I don't see anything in here with regards to how often they're going to be briefed, and if it's going to be a small army of officers, and that's the word that's in there, what's the plan? Do you need to increase the amount of officers that you have? Because the workload would be considerable, I think. Really, really good workload, because if you've got money that's sat there and parishes don't know about it, or they get frustrated that they've heard that there's money but they don't know how much and that it's perhaps not being utilised, there's a lot of work there, and there's an increase in...
But is this not some of the issues you want to try and tease out with the review?
So say that again, sorry?
I said, are these not some of the issues we need to tease out with the review without doing it now?
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. You need to refine the words, and so I wanted to just speak on that point. When you come to refine the words, just have a little think about how it's going to be achieved. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. So we'll move on then to item 9, regeneration asset, including events and communities. This is for one of you two. There's no papers on it. The housing delivery pipeline will be submitted at the November meeting, which we know about. Oh, it's the informal update. So sorry, I think this is about the one that we had, but we're just reporting that we had that discussion about that. Maybe when we come on to the work plan, we might want to. So the briefing that we had on the Avenue and Belgrade House, and that was all. So we're just advising the committee that it has taken place. So work programme. I'm conscious of the fact before we take on a whole load of additional work. So let's just look at what we're going to have in November. So the November meeting, we'll finish the scrutiny, the budget scrutiny planning, but we probably need to have some idea as to what you're planning to do with the budget before we can do that. So
can I comment on
those two will dovetail? Yeah, Jonathan.
Yeah, just comment on one. And actually, I know there's the tail end item today is this prioritisation toolkit. If you remember, I put forward that scrutiny document around Doge activity, and regardless of whether or not that has happened or not happened, I still think we agreed at the last meeting we would carry it over. The paper was attached to the last meeting, but it's not this time, and it's not reflected on the work plan, but we did agree that we would carry it over, particularly when we get to budget, because it wasn't just about the scrutiny of data, which, as we agreed last time, was largely being picked up and dealt with. It was more about impact, if there is any, on spend, and it's looking increasingly like there won't be, but I think we still need it on the list.
Yeah, well, I'm not suggesting, as I say, it's all gone very quiet in the Doge front for the time being. But on the next meeting, what do we have, James? Waste collection cleansing review, but that's meeting soon, a few days. So there'll be something just as a verbal update as to what's going on with that.
It's an update on regeneration projects.
Right, which is the full, like the town centre ones and various other bits and pieces.
I think that was the pipeline item that was mentioned. It's been an early draft of that. Yeah,
right.
One of the officers has been in contact with me about the dates
Okay.
of the meeting.
And quarterly reports will be coming through. We'll bring back the 106 thing to have a look at. Performance monitoring, they're just the standard items. Is there anything else that we're going to have on there that we want to?
Chair, I made the point earlier on about this asset issue. Is there anything we can do with that? I mean, it sort of links in terms of one of the items that you referred to, but I don't know whether it's covered. And that's this point about we do have a fairly chunky amount of assets that have been identified, is my understanding, for disposal at some point.
I thought we'd already identified what they were going to be. Or has that been changed with changes?
I think that work has been
change
going
of
on.
administration.
I think there are some that have been identified, is my understanding. I'm sure that you'll be able to advise better. But I think the point I'm making about that is that's capital, potentially, that could be reutilised. And I think there's something, from my point of view, about getting a better understanding on what actually does sit in that area that is up for disposal and what potentially could happen to any proceeds or any funding from that for the capital budget. Stuart.
The pipeline does look at sites that are in our ownership. It does look at the regeneration or redevelopment of those sites as we go forward. In terms of purchases, etc., obviously that's HRA monies, not
It's not council money, it's HRA money, yeah.
General fund, sorry, late, apologies. So again, we don't look at the financing as yet because the feasibilities are still sort of moving forward, but what it does show is a healthy pipeline. It shows where we're utilising Homes England grant. It looks at timelines that are involved in that. So again, it will touch on some of the points that you make, but again, in terms of HRA, if you've got a site coming forward, we've got a formula in which it's got to make sense and a business case that makes sense. So it's a case-by-case basis in terms of the funding subject to feasibility and business case. But we'll touch on all of that, Jonathan.
It's also linked, I think you had a question on Monday at Cabinet, it's linked to a similar point about for some of those assets there is potentially a cost associated with them in terms of security or protection or whatever it might be, you know, for empty facilities that are not being utilised, and I think that's in your inbox probably is a question, I think, is my understanding. So I think that's what I'm getting at, is we have a block of assets, some of which have been earmarked already for stuff that's not going to be kept by the council and redeveloped. From my point of view, it would be great to have a real understanding of what's the timeline around those assets, because some of those have been sat there for some time and are potentially costing as they sit there.
Is there any other items that members want on the committee for November? Sorry.
Sorry, it's not on November. If I could just flag up, we've got the flood risk management strategy. It's coloured in amber. I think some of the Section 19 reports are coming through now. There's certainly the one for Darlington. It would be really good if those can be put in there, because I think at present they probably don't necessarily go anywhere, but it'd be good to see them in coordinated fashion so that they can be taken into account as well. That's just a request.
Where's that?
It's the last one. And I'm not entirely sure why it is listed as amber, because there's a date identified for it. So that
Okay.
should
Well, if it's green, whenever, if we could just
Okay,
get the Section 19 reports feeding in there.
Okay.
Just in advance of that, we were planning to do an update to all members on flooding Section 19s, what's come out of that, all the work that's been done behind that. The one that we'll have in March is the statutory requirement, where we show the flood management. So we'll be able to do both of those, Sally. But yeah, we're going to do that as a members' briefing, probably on Teams, so all members invited, because flooding's obviously something all members want to be aware of and appreciate. Yeah.
So is there anything else that members want on the November meeting? Any problems here at all? No? Okay. So item 11 then, the scrutiny review prioritisation toolkit. So firstly, can I thank Silas for all his work on this. So the history of this was, if you remember, I think it was the first meeting that we had, Silas suggested that we should look at some risk-based things. I then said, well, why don't you bring that across to the triangulation group, which would try and get a uniform approach across all of the scrutiny process, across all of the council, and not just this one. That has then become this scorecard looking at the risk, and I certainly think we should implement it in terms of also looking at, when we're looking at the budgets, maybe looking at the risk of them being delivered or not delivered, as opposed to the actual, does 2 and 2 equal 4, let Martin assume that it did, and let us start thinking, what's the deliverability of these sort of things. So, triangulation group have done that, contacted other councils and found out, much to Silas's chagrin, that it wasn't a bright idea, that somebody else was doing it. Was it Bristol, you said? Was it Bristol you said was doing it down there? Bristol and Lincolnshire had similar ideas, so we've harnessed it all together and come up with this triangulation group approved it. I think it'll be going to all of the committees now. Do you want to add anything to that, Silas?
Sure, thank you. I think when I attended that first meeting, there was lots of excitement about lots of different projects, and it just felt like whoever was going to shout loudest or shouted last might get the priority. And so it kind of made sense for us to have some kind of a scoring system, not to, kind of take away any autonomy or decision making from the scrutiny panels, but just to have a framework so that everybody could agree on the sort of scoring, and then you've got visibility and traceability, openness and honesty, within the committee and with the public on what the priorities are, which is great, and I look forward to seeing it being used. But I'm kind of struggling with this a little bit, and maybe this is another bright idea that some other council may have come up with. But when I look at what it is that we're going to scrutinise in these yellow and amber and green things, what I'm used to seeing, where we can see, because ultimately the issue is there's only so much time and there's only so many people to do the scrutiny. And in project management, you have a Gantt chart and you have something from left to right that's got dates and times and resources there, and you can do things like resource leveling, and you can kind of see in one single picture whether or not you've got clashes, whether or not you've got overlaps. You can't see anything visual in this to see whether or not you can achieve it by the end of the year, or indeed if you've got any spare capacity to do additional scrutiny. And so I'm wondering if there's something that sits behind this report that we're looking at now, a Gantt chart that shows how many people we've got available, how many volunteers we need, what it is we want to look at, over which periods, to kind of see if we can make more efficient and effective use of our resources to scrutinise the things that we'd like to.
Any other comments? Sorry. Any other comments? I'm not arguing with you. I'm just.
That's unusual.
It's too late. Any other comments on this? I think we're just noting it, aren't we?
That's right.
Yeah. So, but I do think it'll be quite useful. I think when we get into budget scrutiny, it'll be quite useful now to try and use this as a principle and see what outcomes we do get. Slight variation in what we have done, so I'm quite looking forward to that.
When do you suppose we might have a go at using that toolkit? Which month of the year?
Well, once we get into the budget scrutiny, which would be December.
Yeah.
It'll not be far.
Okay.
James?
I think the toolkit will come into its own when any scrutiny committee is in the position of having several good ideas good pieces of work that it might do, and needing to choose between them in a objective way. And the reality is we're not in that position at the moment, simply because we've come off the back of an election, and not just any election, but one that resulted in a change of administration, new councillors, new people in new roles. The scrutiny committees are getting used to the function of scrutiny, the things within their remit. So I don't think this is a normal year because of that. I would expect it to be the toolkit to be used more as scrutiny progresses.
But I certainly also think once we get into, if you're going to start looking at the impact of the budget and things like that, or maybe changes or suggestions that we want to make, I think we should be able to and should use it at that point. Otherwise, it's a complete waste of time. So. Right, well, I think we got to the end. There is no urgent business. I thank you all for your time, and I'll close the meeting at 19:46.